The first 3.5 minutes of Malignant are going to inform you as to whether or not you have any interest in watching this movie. It has all the B-movie horror tropes. The lights are flickering on and off. There are Dutch angles, exaggerated perspectives, and an expressionistic use of color. The shaky camera work gives the vibe of an 80s or 90s B-movie, or an Italian horror film on crack. The acting is not that good. By the time Dr. Florence Weaver speaks one of the film's most quotable lines,
"It's time we cut out the cancer,"
and a chunky metal guitar follows, you might have already noped right out of Malignant, but I was all in. It's cheesy, and I think somewhat self-aware too. No, it's not very scary, although personally there are a few horror films I find to be genuinely scary, and a film being scary, like a film being funny, can be very subjective. I find parts of Malignant to be more humorous than horrific, although it provided some entertaining gore and action, especially during the conclusion. Malignant is directed by James Wan, who created the Conjuring franchise and co-created the Saw and Insidious franchises with his close friend Leigh Whannell. But experience with these movies might not entirely prepare you for how off-the-wall, batshit crazy Malignant is. By the way, Leigh Whannell wrote and directed the 2020 version of Invisible Man, one of the last movies to be released in theaters before the big lockdown, so he is continuing to make relevant contributions to the genre of horror as well. James Wan, his wife Ingrid Bisou, and Akala Cooper came up with the story and screenplay for Malignant. Cooper wrote several episodes of the Netflix Luke Cage show, and her most prominent horror credit is that she wrote one episode of American Horror Story during season 6 in 2016. The plot of Malignant follows the outline of a giallo film, an Italian subgenre combining murder, mystery, and horror. Giallo is the Italian word for yellow and references cheap paperback thrillers that were printed with yellow covers. A giallo film is usually a story where a series of gruesome murders take place by an unseen killer, sometimes wearing a trench coat, a black glove, or a mask. The protagonist is often a female, enduring some kind of psychological distress, and there's usually a pair of cops trying to solve the mystery. The giallo film is essentially the predecessor to the slasher flick. Dario Argento's first film, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, is credited with popularizing the genre, though technically the first giallo film is Mario Bava's 1963 film, The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Giallo films are generally known for gory kills and unique camera perspectives with clunky, stilted dialogue and confusing storylines, so they're not exactly for everybody. Some might consider them to be an acquired taste. In its construction, Malignant hits all these points. The protagonist Madison, played by Annabelle Wallis, begins to witness murders in her dreams as if she's in the room, so she goes to the police, who are searching for the same serial killer. The setup isn't that unique. It does wear its influences on its sleeve, though without an awareness of the genre Malignant pays homage to, it might seem like a more traditional slasher movie. It has a lot of scenes that are going to feel familiar. The scene where the window is suspiciously open. The hypnosis to reveal a hidden memory scene. The character who is about to leave work, but hears a sound and for some reason goes back. And all the while you're going, what are you doing? Just go home. Just leave. You don't get tipped enough to investigate suspicious noises after hours. The musical score is composed by Joseph Bishara, who also composed the scores for other James Wan films, notably Insidious and The Conjuring, though he also composed one track on the Aquaman soundtrack, the scene in the trench that was shot and scored like a horror movie. He also plays demonic characters on screen for The Conjuring and Insidious as well. His soundtrack for Malignant is a traditional modern horror score in that it provides discordant, atmospheric accompaniment to the slower moments and terse, echoed strings for the jump scares. Though it does give a nostalgic vibe with heavy reverb and retro synths pulsating throughout. It approaches an action score, especially during the chase scenes. The sound of feedback is used in conjunction with startling moments, as well as some really punchy, exaggerated sound effects during the kills and fights that play into the cartoonish nature of it all. The characters are absolutely ridiculous. The character of Madison's boyfriend is obviously abusive because he likes to watch UFC. He gets really mad without his UFC. The performance of the sister character Sydney by Maddie Hassan is probably the worst one in the movie, though some of the dialogue couldn't be helped no matter who the actor was. The acting is pretty bad across the board in this movie. The two cops are completely one note, and their dialogue is all pretty flat, but this isn't that unusual for the genre. Most of the film's action is comprised of a series of killings and then a chase down a fire escape and into the tunnels, leading up to the final act. But when Malignant's big secret is revealed, it really is a lot of fun. One of the questions I've seen frequently in the discourse surrounding this movie is, did James Wan make this as a joke? Or were the people who made this aware that it's really funny at times? I don't think this was made as a joke exactly. I don't think they set out to make a so bad it's good movie, because that never works. The lack of self-awareness is kind of what makes a so bad it's good movie work. I don't think this is a bad movie. I think it's intentionally over the top, trashy, gory schlock, yet there are serious themes in Malignant, with pregnancy and birth being central to some of the more disturbing moments. This is about to get into spoilers, so if you haven't watched it yet, I do recommend Malignant, especially for horror enthusiasts. Over the course of the movie, Madison witnesses the murders of 3 doctors who were involved in an operation to presumably remove a tumor from her skull. It turns out the tumor is actually her conjoined twin brother Gabriel, who was surgically concealed into the back of her skull. He can cause lights to flicker on and off, pacemakers to explode, communicate to Madison telepathically or through a radio, and, most importantly, hijack her body, leaving her consciousness in a suspended dream state in order to walk around backwards with a gold trophy of a sword reading excellence and hack apart anyone who would come between him and Madison. It's a twisted tale of sibling rivalry, as Gabriel is envious of Madison's adopted sister and wants her dead. It is a stretch of the imagination to believe that Madison's sister didn't know that she was adopted until a key scene in the film,
Maddie, what are you talking about?
and that Madison wouldn't remember anything of her childhood, but it does allow mystery to build throughout the film. The character of Gabriel captures the look of an iconic slasher villain with a monstrous face, a dark coat, and a gold pointy thing to stab people with, though Madison's lifeless face hanging behind makes it all more unique and more humorous as well. Gabriel also turns Madison's body super powered, amping up their strength and agility. The jail scene is the most exciting and memorable one in the film. It's so ridiculous, even down to the cartoonish looking costumes that the characters are wearing. The massacre that takes place here, cross-cut with the surgery footage and the reveal of Madison's transformation, is excessively gory, disgusting, and completely silly, so I think it's wonderful. It does take a little too long to get to this scene, perhaps one of the trappings of sticking to the giallo format so closely. Like, wouldn't the police have started to suspect it was her before there were 4 people killed? Yet there are fun, weird moments that have stuck with me. Madison's sister dressed as a Disney princess in the hospital was an odd scene. Then there's this one character who's thirsty for the detective guy, but she keeps getting shot down.
You're gonna find that missing half.
Yeah, don't we all?
When Malignant tries to be funny, it's just kind of awkward. When it tries to be cool, it's funny. And when it tries to be scary, it's not really that scary, but the gory effects still look good. It's explained earlier in the film that Madison has suffered multiple miscarriages, and in the final act, this is paid off when it's revealed that Gabriel was feeding off the fetuses in the womb to grow stronger. Another key disturbing moment is when Gabriel is manipulating Madison as a child to believe that she's cutting a birthday cake, when in reality, she's standing over the belly of her adopted mother, pregnant with her sister at the time. This emphasis on birth, growth, and attachment to the mother makes Malignant just as much a body horror film as it is a slasher film. Gabriel kidnaps the birth mother, who is presumed dead, and keeps her chained up in the attic of Madison's house. Gabriel has also become further suppressed since the birth of Madison's sister, Sydney, and desires an impossible reunification with Madison, hating their mother for the separation. Gabriel's grief and loss is understandable, despite the fact that his dialogue is all read in this goofy, evil voice.
If my blade had punched a hole in your face last night, would that have been personal?
The implications of a split personality are as old to horror as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, though Malignant brings it to the modern era in a way that reimagines old horror tropes, albeit with some really bad acting that actually gets a pass from me because it makes me laugh. That's not to say that this is definitively a top-tier campy horror classic. It's really too soon to tell. All of this has to be an homage to Frank Henenlotter's classic exploitation masterpiece, Basket Case from 1981. Basket Case really deserves its own in-depth review, but I'd like to mention it here as a reference point. Maybe skip this section if you want to go into Basket Case without knowing anything about it. In Basket Case, a strange loner named Dwayne carries around a locked basket containing a creature that turns out to be his previously conjoined twin brother Belial. Like in Malignant, the creature becomes increasingly envious of the other people in the protagonist's life and lashes out in violent ways. Unlike Malignant, Dwayne and Belial have been separated physically, and Dwayne is manipulated more subtly by his monstrous twin. Given that Basket Case is super low budget, incredibly trashy, and filled with questionable acting, I think it's an amazing film. It's very rewatchable, and shockingly, there's sympathy to be felt for the unhinged weirdo protagonist and even the small rubber creature that inhabits the basket. Malignant is like a big-budget remake of Basket Case as a giallo film, which makes sense because Frank Henenlotter is a big fan of Dario Argento. Malignant's big budget definitely shows in its visuals as Madison's whole world transforms around her each time Gabriel takes over her body. Malignant had a budget of about $40 million. Compare that to Basket Case, which was about $35,000. But Malignant has only recouped $32 million at the box office. It's a film that critics have rated higher than audiences, although I would have expected this to be the other way around because it doesn't come across like the high art film that critics usually get so hard over. Perhaps critics have understood the references to giallo and the associations with body horror, while general audiences have just found it weird and kind of bad. It is weird and kind of bad, but in the end, I think Malignant is more good than bad, even if it's not that good. Whatever that means.
Time to cut out